The stagecoach rattled into Benton, Montana territory on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, carrying Willa Zimmerman and secrets that weighed heavier than any trunk strapped to its roof. She pressed her gloved hand against the dust-covered window, watching the small frontier town materialize through the haze. Wooden buildings lined a wide dirt street, their false fronts reaching toward the endless sky like hopeful prayers. The mountains beyond rose purple and magnificent, indifferent to human struggles. Willa's heart hammered against her ribcage as the driver shouted and the horses slowed. This was her chance at starting over, her last chance, really. The letter from Mrs. Henderson felt like salvation itself when it arrived 3 weeks ago, offering a position as a seamstress in her dress shop. No questions asked, just work and wages and the possibility of redemption. The coach jerked to a halt outside the station, and Willa gathered her worn carpetbag and the small satchel that contained everything she owned. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her bonnet, tucking away the dark blonde hair that had worked loose during the journey. She was 23 years old and felt ancient, carrying the weight of choices that could never be unmade. "End of the line, miss," the driver called, already climbing down to help the other passengers. Willa descended carefully, her legs unsteady after 2 days of constant travel. The Montana heat wrapped around her like a blanket despite the late afternoon hour. She stood on the boardwalk, momentarily overwhelmed by the sounds of this new place. A blacksmith's hammer rang out somewhere nearby. Horses nickered and stamped. Men's voices carried from the saloon across the street, punctuated by a woman's high laugh. "You must be Miss Zimmerman." An older woman approached, her gray hair pulled back severely, her dress immaculate despite the dust that seemed to coat everything else. "I'm Martha Henderson." "Welcome to Benton, Mrs. Henderson." Willa managed a smile that felt fragile on her lips. "Thank you for this opportunity. I cannot tell you what it means." Martha's eyes were sharp but not unkind as they assessed her new employee. "Come along. The shop is just down the street, and I have a room prepared for you above it. You look exhausted, dear. We will talk business tomorrow after you have rested." The dress shop was neat and well kept, with fabrics displayed in the front window and a row of dress forms draped in various stages of completion. Martha led her through the work area and up a narrow staircase to a small room that contained a bed, a washstand, and a trunk for storage. It was simple but clean, and Willa felt tears prick her eyes at the kindness of it. "Thank you," she whispered. "Truly." Martha paused at the door. "I do not pry into people's pasts, Miss Zimmerman. I have learned that most folks come west for a fresh start of one kind or another. What matters to me is that you can sew and that you show up for work on time. Everything else is your own business." After Martha left, Willa sat on the bed and allowed herself to cry quietly for the first time in weeks. She cried for the girl she had been, for the mistakes that led her from Philadelphia to a brothel in Denver, for the year she spent in that life before finding the courage to leave. She cried for the shame she carried and the fear that someone here would discover her past and she would be cast out once again. When the tears finally stopped, she washed her face in the basin and unpacked her meager belongings. Tomorrow she would begin again. Tomorrow she would be just another seamstress in a frontier town, unremarkable and hopefully invisible. The next morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through her window. Willa dressed carefully in her most respectable dress, a dark blue cotton that was modest and plain. She pinned her hair up tightly and went downstairs to find Martha already at work, sorting through a shipment of fabric bolts. "Good morning," Martha said briskly. "Come look at these. We have 3 orders to complete this week. Mrs. Patterson wants a new day dress, simple but well made." The banker's daughter is getting married next month and needs her trousseau finished, and we have standing orders for basic mending from half the town. Can you handle fine embroidery?" "Yes, madam. My mother taught me before she died. I have a steady hand." They fell into an easy working rhythm. Willa found comfort in the familiar motions of measuring and cutting and stitching. Martha proved to be exacting but fair, and by lunchtime, Willa felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Perhaps this could work. Perhaps she really could disappear into this quiet life and leave her mistakes behind. The shop door opened with a jingle of bells, and a man stepped inside. Willa glanced up from her stitching and felt her breath catch. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes that were dusty from riding. His hat shadowed his face until he removed it, revealing dark hair touched with gray at the temples and the most striking gray-blue eyes she had ever seen. He looked to be in his early 30s, his face weathered but handsome, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. "Good afternoon, Yates," Martha greeted him warmly. "Your order is not quite ready. I told you it would be another week at least." "I know, Martha. I was in town for supplies and thought I would check." His voice was deep and steady, with a slight drawl that spoke of years spent further south before settling in Montana. His eyes moved to Willa, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks under his gaze. "This is my new seamstress, Miss Willa Zimmerman. She arrived yesterday. Willa, this is Yates Xavier. He runs the Broken Creek Ranch about 5 miles outside town. Miss Zimmerman." Yates nodded to her, his expression polite and curious. "Welcome to Benton." "Thank you, Mr. Xavier." She managed to keep her voice steady despite the way her heart had started racing. There was something about his eyes, the way they looked at her with genuine interest, rather than the calculating assessment she had grown accustomed to in Denver. "Yates is having me make new curtains for his ranch house," Martha explained, returning to her work. "Although why a bachelor rancher suddenly cares about curtains is beyond me." A faint smile touched Yates' lips. "Even a bachelor deserves a house that does not look like a barn inside. My mother would be ashamed if she could see how I have been living." "How is the ranch doing?" Martha asked. "I heard you brought in more cattle this spring." "Doing well enough. The herd is healthy and I have good men working for me. It is hard work but honest work." His eyes drifted back to Willa, and she quickly looked down at her sewing, her fingers suddenly clumsy with the needle. They talked for a few more minutes about ranch business and town matters. Willa listened while keeping her eyes on her work, learning that Yates Xavier was well respected in Benton, that he had built his ranch from nothing over the past 8 years, and that Martha clearly thought highly of him. After he left, Martha gave Willa a knowing look. "He is a good man. One of the best I have known. Lost his wife 5 years ago to fever. Has not looked at another woman since until today." "I do not know what you mean," Willa protested, her cheeks burning. "I have eyes, dear, and I saw the way he looked at you." Martha's expression grew serious. "But I will tell you this. Yates Xavier is the kind of man who deserves honesty. He has been hurt enough in his life." The words felt like a warning, and Willa's fragile hope cracked a little. How could she ever be honest about her past? How could she tell anyone, especially a man like that, what she had been? The days settled into a pattern. Willa worked from dawn until dusk, her fingers flying through seams and hems and delicate embroidery. She kept to herself mostly, speaking politely to customers, but volunteering nothing personal. The women of Benton seemed willing to accept her at face value, though she caught speculative glances now and then. She saw Yates Xavier 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Once when he came to pick up his finished curtains, once when she happened to be sweeping the boardwalk as he rode past, and once at the general store when she was buying thread. Each time, he tipped his hat and spoke to her with that same genuine courtesy. And each time, she felt something inside her chest tighten with longing and fear. It was dangerous to want something, she had learned. Wanting led to poor choices and broken promises, and waking up one day to find yourself someone you never intended to be. On a Saturday afternoon in early September, Willa was hanging sheets to dry behind the shop when she heard raised voices from the alley. She peered around the corner to see a man grabbing at a young Chinese woman, his words slurred with drink. "Come on now, you are not too good for me," he was saying, trying to pull her closer despite her struggles. "Let me go." The woman's voice was frightened but defiant. "I am going to my father's restaurant. Leave me alone." Without thinking, Willa grabbed the broom leaning against the wall and rushed forward. "Get away from her right now." The drunk man turned, swaying slightly. "This is not your business, lady. I am making it my business. Let her go, or I will fetch the sheriff." Willa held the broom like a weapon, her heart pounding but her voice steady. The man spat on the ground but released the young woman, who immediately ran toward the main street. "All you women think you are so high and mighty," he muttered, stumbling away. Willa's hands shook as she lowered the broom. She leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. She knew what it was like to be grabbed by drunken men, to feel helpless and afraid. The memories crashed over her, and she had to close her eyes against them. That was very brave. A deep voice startled her, and she looked up to find Yates Xavier standing at the mouth of the alley. "Though maybe a little foolish, he could have hurt you." "He was hurting her," Willa said simply. "Someone had to help." Yates studied her for a long moment, something like admiration in his eyes. "Still, you should be careful. Not everyone in Benton is as civilized as they ought to be." He hesitated, then added, "I was actually coming to find you. Martha said you get Sunday afternoons off." "Yes." Willa's mouth went dry. "I wondered if you might like to come out to the ranch tomorrow. Have dinner, see the place. Martha mentioned you have not had much chance to see the countryside since you arrived." He looked almost nervous, this confident rancher, and it made him seem more human somehow. Every sensible instinct told her to decline. She could not afford to get close to anyone, especially not a man like Yates Xavier, who deserved someone whole and untainted. But another part of her, the part that still believed in the possibility of redemption, whispered yes. "I would like that," she heard herself say. "Thank you." His smile transformed his face, making him look younger. "I will pick you up at noon then. Bring a hat. The sun can be fierce." That night, Willa lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had just made another terrible mistake. She should tell him the truth, she thought. Before this went any further. Before he looked at her with expectations she could never meet. But the thought of seeing disgust replace the warmth in his eyes made her feel sick. In the morning, she attended church services for the first time since arriving in Benton. The small wooden church was packed with families, and Willa sat in the back, listening to the sermon about forgiveness and fresh starts. She wondered if God really forgave people like her, or if some sins were too large to wash clean. After church, she changed into her nicest dress, a green calico that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her hair up carefully and tried to calm her racing heart. This was just dinner at a ranch. Nothing more. Yates arrived exactly at noon, driving a wagon with a good horse in the traces. He helped her up to the seat with easy courtesy, and they set off down the dusty road leading out of town. "Have you always ranched?" Willa asked, trying to make conversation as the buildings of Benton fell away behind them. "No. I grew up in Texas, working on my father's ranch. After the war, things were hard there. I came north looking for opportunities and found land available here in Montana Territory. It has been a good decision, though winters here make Texas cold snaps look like spring days. You fought in the war." She knew she should not ask, should not pry into his past when she guarded her own so carefully. I did. For the Union, which did not make me popular back home, but I could not fight to preserve slavery. My conscience would not allow it. He glanced at her. That cost me some things. Family connections, friendships, but I have never regretted it. She heard the steel beneath his words and understood that Yates Xavier was a man who lived by his principles, whatever the cost. It made her feel even smaller, even more unworthy. The ranch appeared as they crested a gentle hill. A sturdy house sat in a valley with mountains rising behind it. Corrals and outbuildings spread around it in organized clusters. Cattle dotted the grassland, and the whole scene had a feeling of permanence and purpose that made Willa's chest ache. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "It is home." There was pride in his voice. "Come on, I will show you around before we eat." He introduced her to his 3 ranch hands, who tipped their hats politely before returning to their work. He showed her the barn where his horses stamped and nickered, the chicken coop where hens pecked industriously, the garden where vegetables grew in neat rows. "I am not much of a gardener," he admitted, "but I try. A man should be as self-sufficient as possible out here." The house itself was simple but well built, with real glass windows and a stone fireplace. The new curtains Martha had made hung in the windows, adding a touch of civilization to the rough-hewn interior. Yates had clearly made an effort, tidying up and even placing wildflowers in a jar on the table. "I am not much of a cook either," he said, looking embarrassed, "but I can manage a decent stew, and I baked bread this morning." They ate at his simple table, and the food was better than he claimed. As they talked, Willa felt herself relaxing despite her intentions to keep her guard up. Yates was easy to talk to, asking her questions but not prying, sharing stories about ranch life that made her laugh. "So this one time," he was saying, his eyes crinkling with amusement, "I had this bull that was just ornery as sin. Would charge anything that moved. One morning I came out to find him in a staring contest with a badger. They stood there for near an hour, neither one willing to back down. Finally, the badger just waddled away, and the bull went back to grazing like he had won some great victory." Willa laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her. Who knew ranch life was so dramatic? "You have no idea. Sometimes I think cattle have more personality than most people I have met." He poured them both more coffee from the pot on the stove. "Tell me about you, Willa. What brought you all the way to Montana Territory?" Her laughter died and she stared down at her cup. This was the moment. She could lie, create some pleasant fiction about seeking adventure or visiting relatives, or she could tell him the truth and watch his respect turn to revulsion. "I needed a fresh start," she said carefully. "Things in my past that I wanted to leave behind. We all have things we wish we could change." His voice was gentle. "I have made my share of mistakes, not like mine." The words came out before she could stop them, bitter and raw. Yates was quiet for a moment. "What could a young woman like you have possibly done that deserves such harsh judgment? You do not know." She stood abruptly, walking to the window to stare out at the mountains. "You do not know what I was, what I did." She heard him rise and cross the room behind her. He did not touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel his presence. "Then tell me." "Why?" She turned to face him, tears burning her eyes. "So you can look at me with disgust, so you can take me back to town and never speak to me again, or so I can understand." His gray-blue eyes were steady on hers. "I am not a man who judges easily, Willa. Life is too complicated for that." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to, but the fear was so large, so consuming. "I worked in a brothel," she said flatly, watching for his reaction. "In Denver. For a year. That is what I am. That is what I did." The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Willa wrapped her arms around herself, waiting for the inevitable rejection. But when Yates spoke, his voice was calm and measured. "How did you end up there?" The question surprised her. Not condemnation, not disgust, just a simple question. She found herself answering, the words spilling out like water from a broken dam. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her parents dying of cholera when she was 19. About the debts they left behind and the landlord who offered her a terrible choice. About running instead, using her last money to go west, believing she could find work as a seamstress. About arriving in Denver with nothing and discovering that respectable work was nearly impossible to find for a woman alone with no references. "I tried," she said, her voice breaking. "I tried so hard to find honest work, but no one would hire me. I had nowhere to go, nothing to eat. And there was this woman, Madame Rose, who said she would take care of me. She seemed kind at first. By the time I understood what she really wanted, I was already in her debt for room and board. She said I had to work it off." Yates listened without interrupting as she described that year, the shame and fear and degradation of it. How she saved every penny she could hide, planning her escape. How she finally slipped away one night and used her savings to get to Cheyenne, then to Helena, finally to Benton, getting further from Denver with each desperate move. "Martha took me in without asking questions," Willa finished. "She gave me a chance when no one else would. I thought maybe here I could be someone different, someone clean." When she finally met Yates' eyes again, she saw sadness there but not judgment, not disgust. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his calloused one. "You are not defined by what was done to you," he said quietly, "or by the choices you made to survive. You are not dirty or shameful, Willa. You are a woman who faced impossible circumstances and found the courage to escape. That takes strength most people never have to discover in themselves." "How can you say that?" She could not stop the tears now. "How can you not see me as ruined?" "Because I see who you are, not what happened to you." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "I see a woman who stood up to a drunk to protect a stranger, who works hard every day and asks nothing from anyone, who has been brave enough to keep going when it would have been easier to give up. That is what I see. You should not want anything to do with me." But even as she said it, she did not pull her hand away. "Maybe, but I do." He lifted her hand and pressed it gently to his chest, over his heart. "I lost my wife 5 years ago. Sarah was good and kind, and when she died, I thought I would never want to open my heart again. It hurt too much. But then you stepped off that stagecoach and something in me woke up. I have been drawn to you from that first moment. You do not know me. Then let me. Let me know you, the real you, everything you are." His other hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I am not offering judgment, Willa. I am offering a future, if you are brave enough to take it." "I am afraid," she whispered. "So am I. That is how I know this matters." He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to move away, and pressed his lips to her forehead in a kiss that felt like a benediction. "You do not have to decide anything today, but know this. When I look at you, I do not see your past. I only see our future ahead." The words broke something open inside her, some hard shell of shame she had been carrying. She turned her face into his shoulder and cried, really cried, while he held her carefully as though she were something precious. "I do not deserve this," she said against his shirt. "I do not deserve you. We all deserve kindness, Willa. We all deserve a chance to start again." His hand stroked her hair gently. "Stay, have supper with me. Let me take you riding across the ranch. Just be here with me for a while longer." She nodded, unable to speak. They stood there in his simple house while the afternoon sun slanted through the windows and mountains stood eternal watch outside. Something fundamental had shifted between them, some barrier crossed that could not be uncrossed. They spent the rest of the afternoon in an oddly peaceful companionship. Yates saddled 2 horses, and they rode across his land at an easy pace. He showed her the creek that gave the ranch its name, clear water tumbling over smooth stones. He pointed out where his property boundaries lay, the places he hoped to expand into someday. He talked about his plans and dreams with an openness that humbled her. "I want to build something that lasts," he said as they sat by the creek letting the horses drink. "Something I can be proud of. I want a family again someday, children who will inherit this land and know that their father built it with his own hands." "You will have that," Willa said. "You are the kind of man who deserves all of it. What about you?" He turned to look at her. "What do you want, Willa?" She had not let herself want anything in so long. Wanting hurt too much. But sitting here beside this man who looked at her like she mattered, she allowed herself to imagine it. A home. A place where she belonged. Maybe even the family she thought she had forfeited through her choices. "I want peace," she said finally. "I want to wake up without being afraid. I want to feel clean again." "You are clean." His voice was firm. "Do not let the world tell you otherwise." When he took her back to town that evening, he helped her down from the wagon with the same careful courtesy he had shown all day. "May I call on you again?" he asked. "Take you to dinner at the hotel. Let people see us together." "Yates." She looked at him seriously. "If people find out about my past, it will reflect badly on you. It could hurt your business, your standing in the community." "Let me worry about that. Will you have dinner with me? Please?" She knew she should refuse. She should protect him from the scandal of being associated with her. But she was not strong enough to deny herself this chance, selfish as that might be. "Yes," she said, "I would like that." His smile was worth every risk. He tipped his hat and climbed back into the wagon. "Saturday night then. 6 o'clock. Willa watched him drive away, her heart feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier than it had in years. Martha was waiting when she went inside, giving her a knowing look but saying nothing. Willa was grateful for the discretion. She needed time to process everything that had happened, everything that had been said. That night, she dreamed of mountains and clear creeks and a house with curtains in the windows. She dreamed of being held carefully, like something that mattered. When she woke, she could still feel the ghost of Yates' hand on her cheek and the impossible promise in his words. "I only see our future ahead." The week that followed felt strange and dreamlike. Willa went through her work mechanically, her mind constantly drifting to thoughts of Yates. She caught herself smiling at odd moments, then feeling guilty for daring to hope. Several times, she nearly sent him a message calling off their dinner, convinced that she was being foolish and selfish. But each time, she remembered the way he looked at her, without judgment or disgust, and she could not quite bring herself to do it. Saturday arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. Willa spent the afternoon preparing, washing her hair and pressing her best dress. It was nothing fancy, just a simple dove gray cotton with a modest neckline, but it was well made and fit her properly. She pinned her hair up in a soft style that Martha helped her with, the older woman's eyes twinkling. "He is a good man," Martha said again. "I am happy for you both." "Nothing has happened," Willa protested. "It is just dinner. My dear, I have lived long enough to recognize when something real is beginning. Just do not be too afraid to let it happen." Yates arrived promptly at 6, dressed in his Sunday best and carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. The hotel dining room was the nicest establishment in Benton, with white tablecloths and real china. Willa felt every eye turn toward them as they entered, the curious and speculative gazes of a small town that found interest in any hint of romance. She held her head high, trying not to show her nervousness. Yates seemed completely unbothered by the attention. He pulled out her chair with easy grace and ordered dinner for them both, consulting with her about her preferences. As they ate, he kept up a steady stream of conversation that helped ease her tension. "I heard from my cattle buyer this week," he said. "The prices are holding steady, which is good news. I should be able to afford that new barn I have been wanting by next spring." "That is wonderful." Willa found herself genuinely interested in the details of his ranching operation. He talked about it with such passion, such clear pride in what he had built. "I am boring you," he said suddenly, looking embarrassed. "Forgive me. Ranchers are notorious for talking too much about cattle. You are not boring me at all. I like hearing about your work. It is clear how much it means to you." They talked through the entire meal, the conversation flowing naturally between them. Yates asked about her work with Martha, about the kinds of sewing she enjoyed most. He asked about her childhood in Philadelphia, and she found herself sharing happy memories for the first time in years. Her mother teaching her to sew. Her father taking her to see the ships in the harbor. Simple moments she had almost forgotten. After dinner, Yates suggested a walk, and they strolled down Benton's main street as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He offered her his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him beside her. "I have been thinking," he said as they walked, "about what you told me last Sunday, about your past." Willa tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Perhaps he had spent the week reconsidering. Perhaps he had realized he could not overlook what she had been after all. "I want you to know," he continued, "that it does not change how I see you, not even a little. If anything, knowing what you survived makes me admire you even more." "Yates." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "You do not have to say that. I am not saying it because I have to. I am saying it because it is true." He covered her hand where it rested on his arm. "I have been thinking about everything you told me, about the choices you faced. No one should ever be put in that position. The world failed you, Willa. Society failed you. But you did what you had to do to survive, and then you found the strength to escape and build a new life. That is not shameful. That is heroic." Tears blurred her vision. "I do not feel heroic. I feel broken." "Then let me help you feel whole again." His voice was fervent, his eyes intense in the fading light. "I am not offering charity or pity. I am offering genuine care. I have feelings for you, Willa, strong feelings. And I believe you feel something for me too." She did. God help her, she did. Being with him felt right in a way nothing else ever had. When he looked at her, she felt seen, truly seen and still accepted. It terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. "I do," she whispered. "I feel something for you, but I am afraid of hurting you, of bringing shame on you." "You could never shame me. Being with you, caring about you, it only makes me proud. Proud that you would trust me with your story. Proud that you would give me a chance." Before she could overthink it, Willa rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was a brief, tentative press of lips, but it felt like a promise. Yates made a soft sound of surprise and pleasure, then pulled back just enough to look at her. "Does that mean you will give us a chance?" he asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yes," she said, and felt something like hope bloom in her chest. "Yes, I will." He kissed her again, properly this time, his arms coming around her as though she were something infinitely precious. Willa leaned into the embrace, letting herself feel safe for the first time in years. People were probably watching, probably already gossiping. She could not bring herself to care. They courted properly after that, by the standards of a frontier town. Yates came to see her every Sunday, sometimes taking her back to the ranch, sometimes just sitting with her in Martha's parlor while they talked. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers and smooth stones from the creek, once a ribbon he saw in the general store that he thought would suit her. She made him shirts with careful stitching, putting all her skill into the seams. They talked about everything. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about the brother he lost in the war fighting on the opposite side, about his first wife Sarah, who he had met in Abilene during a cattle drive and married after a whirlwind courtship. "She was nothing like you," he said one afternoon as they sat by the creek. "That sounds harsh, but I do not mean it that way. Sarah was sweet and gentle, content with simple things. She made our house a home, made me laugh. I loved her very much, but what I feel for you is different, deeper somehow. Maybe because we have both seen hard things, both survived loss." "Do you think she would approve?" Willa asked. "Of me? I think she would be happy I found someone to love again. She made me promise, before she died, that I would not spend my life alone. I could not keep that promise for a long time, but you make me want to try." As autumn settled over Montana territory, painting the mountains in brilliant gold and crimson, Willa felt herself changing. The constant fear that had lived in her chest for so long began to ease. She started sleeping through the night without nightmares. She caught herself humming while she worked. Martha teased her about being love-struck, and Willa could not even deny it, but peace never lasted long. It was a Tuesday in October when the stagecoach brought trouble in the form of a man in an expensive suit and cruel eyes. Willa was sweeping the boardwalk in front of the dress shop when she saw him step down from the coach, and her blood turned to ice. Silas Thornton, one of Madame Rose's best customers back in Denver. A banker who liked to hurt women and had the money to ensure they could not refuse him. She dropped the broom and rushed inside, her heart hammering. Maybe he had not seen her. Maybe he was just passing through. Maybe the bell over the door chimed and Silas walked in, his gaze sweeping the shop until it landed on her. A slow, nasty smile spread across his face. Well, little Willa, what are the chances of finding you here in this dusty nothing of a town?" He approached the counter, ignoring Martha's confused greeting. "I am here visiting my brother, the land office agent. Imagine my surprise when I spotted you through the window. Still plying your trade, are you? Although this is quite a different establishment than Madame Rose's." "I am working as a seamstress," Willa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I left Denver over a year ago." "A seamstress," he laughed, the sound oily and unpleasant. "That is rich. Does your employer know what kind of woman she hired? Do the good people of Benton know what you really are?" Martha stepped forward, her expression icy. "Sir, I do not know who you are, but I will not have you speaking to my employee in that tone. If you have business here, state it. Otherwise, kindly leave." Silas turned his attention to Martha, looking her up and down with barely concealed contempt. "Your employee is a whore, madam, or was quite recently. I should know. I paid enough to get out." Martha's voice cracked like a whip. "Get out of my shop right now, or I will fetch the sheriff." "The sheriff?" Silas's smile widened. "I think he would be very interested to know what kind of woman is living in his town. I think everyone would be interested. My brother plays cards at the saloon every evening. I am sure the information would spread quite quickly." He tipped his hat in a mocking gesture and walked out, leaving silence in his wake. Willa stood frozen, her worst nightmare materializing before her eyes. Martha came around the counter and took her hands. "Breathe, child, just breathe. He is going to tell everyone." Willa's voice came out high and thin. "By tomorrow, the whole town will know I have to leave. I have to. You will do no such thing." Martha's grip tightened. "You have done nothing wrong. Nothing. That man is a bully and a coward trying to intimidate you, but he is right. Once people know, then they know. Some will judge because people always do, but many will not. You have worked hard here, been kind and honest. You have made friends whether you realize it or not. Give folks a chance before you assume the worst." Willa wanted to believe her, but fear clawed at her throat. She thought of Yates, of the way he looked at her with such respect. That would be gone soon. Everyone would know what she had been, and they would never see her as anything else. She made it through the rest of the day somehow, going through the motions of work while her mind spun uselessly. That evening, she sat in her small room, trying to decide what to do. She could run again, pack her few belongings and catch the next stage out of town. Start over somewhere else where no one knew her. But the thought of leaving Benton, leaving Martha and the life she had built, and especially leaving Yates, made her feel physically sick. She did not want to run anymore. She was tired of running. The knock on her door came just after sunset. She opened it to find Yates standing there, his hat in his hands, his expression serious. "I heard," he said simply. "Half the town has heard by now. May I come in?" She stepped aside, her heart sinking. Here it came. The rejection she had been expecting all along. He closed the door behind him and stood there, studying her face. "Are you all right?" he asked. The question surprised her. "I thought you would be angry, ashamed to be associated with me." "Why would I be ashamed?" He crossed the small room and took her hands the same way Martha had earlier. "You told me the truth weeks ago. Nothing has changed." "Everything has changed. Everyone knows now. That man, Silas Thornton, he has been telling everyone at the saloon. Your name has probably come up, that you have been courting me. People will talk. Let them talk." His voice was steady, calm in the face of her panic. "I do not care what people say, Willa. I care about you. You should care. This could hurt your business, your reputation. My reputation is my own concern, and it is solid enough to withstand some gossip. As for my business, any man who judges you harshly is not someone I want to deal with anyway." He cupped her face in his hands, making her look at him. "Listen to me. I meant what I said. When I look at you, I only see our future ahead. I do not care who knows about your past. I do not care what they say. You are the woman I am falling in love with, and I will not let you face this alone. You are falling in love with me." The words came out as a whisper. "I am. I think I have been since the day you got off that stagecoach. You are brave and strong and kind, and I want to spend my life proving to you that you deserve to be loved." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay, do not run. Let me stand beside you." Willa broke down then, crying against his chest while he held her. The fear was still there, coiled tight in her stomach, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. There was also relief, gratitude, and the fragile beginning of real love. "I do not know how to do this," she said when she could speak again. "How to face everyone. With your head high. You have nothing to be ashamed of." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "Tomorrow is Sunday. Come to church with me. Let people see that I am proud to have you on my arm. That is just inviting trouble. Maybe. But it is also showing them that you have nothing to hide, and I have no intention of abandoning you. We face this together, or we do not face it at all." She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. "Together then." Sunday morning arrived cold and crisp, frost glittering on the ground. Willa dressed in her best, her hands trembling only slightly as she pinned her hair. Yates called for her in his wagon, and they drove to the small church together while the whole town watched. Walking into that church was one of the hardest things Willa had ever done. She felt the weight of every gaze, heard the whispers that fell silent as they passed. But Yates kept his hand firm on her elbow, guiding her to a pew near the front. Martha was already there, and she smiled warmly, patting the seat beside her. The service seemed to last forever. Reverend Matthews preached about forgiveness and casting the first stone, and Willa wondered if he had chosen his text deliberately. When they stood to sing hymns, she felt Yates' deep voice beside her, steady and sure. His presence was an anchor, keeping her from floating away on a tide of shame and fear. After the service, the moment of truth arrived. People filed out slowly, and Willa braced herself for cold shoulders and cutting remarks. But the first person to approach her was Mrs. Patterson, one of Martha's regular customers. "Good morning, Miss Zimmerman," she said, her tone measured. "I want you to know that I appreciate the work you did on my dress last month. The stitching was impeccable." It was not exactly a warm endorsement, but it was not rejection either. Willa managed a smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." Others followed. Some people were openly hostile, turning away or making disparaging comments just loud enough to hear. But others were kind, or at least neutral. The banker's wife stopped to chat about the weather. The blacksmith tipped his hat respectfully. The young Chinese woman Willa had helped weeks ago approached shyly and pressed a small package into her hands. "Dumplings from my father's restaurant," she said. "To thank you for helping me. You are brave." By the time they left the churchyard, Willa felt wrung out but not destroyed. Yes, some people judged her harshly, but others saw past her history, or at least were willing to give her a chance. It was more than she had dared to hope. "You see," Yates said as they drove back toward the ranch, "you are not alone in this. People are not as quick to condemn as you feared." "Some are," she pointed out. "Some always will be, but they do not matter. The people who matter, the good people, they can see who you really are." He covered her hand with his. "Come have dinner with me. Let us spend the rest of this day not thinking about gossips and small minds." They spent the afternoon at the ranch, falling into the easy companionship they had built over the past weeks. Yates cooked again, and this time Willa helped, learning how he made his bread rise so perfectly. They ate by the fire as evening fell, and Yates told her about his plans for expanding the herd next spring. "I was thinking," he said carefully, not quite meeting her eyes, "about building an addition onto the house, another bedroom maybe, a bigger kitchen." "Why would you need that?" she asked, though her heart had started beating faster. "Well," he set down his coffee cup and turned to face her. "I was hoping that maybe someday soon this house might need to accommodate more than just me." Willa's breath caught. "Yates, I love you, Willa. I know we have not been courting long, but I am sure of my feelings. You are the woman I want beside me, the woman I want to build a life with." He took her hands. "I know you are scared. I know the past few days have been hard, but I am asking you to trust me. Trust that what we have is real and strong enough to withstand anything." "I love you too," she said, the words both terrifying and liberating. "I am scared, yes, but I love you. You make me feel like I can be whole again. You already are whole. You just needed someone to see it." He kissed her softly. "I am not asking you to marry me tonight. I know you need time, but I am asking you to think about it, about a future here with me." "I will think about it," she promised. "But Yates, you should know that my past might always follow me. There might be other men like Silas Thornton, other people who know what I was. And we will face them together, just like we did this week. Your past is part of your story, Willa, but it is not the whole story. Our future, that is what matters." She kissed him then, pouring all her hope and fear and love into it. He responded with a tenderness that made her feel cherished, protected. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he said. "Not like that, just stay. Sleep in the spare room. Let me make you breakfast in the morning. Let us have one full day together without worrying about what anyone thinks." It was improper, and they both knew it, but Willa nodded anyway. She wanted this, wanted to wake up in his house and imagine what it would be like to truly belong here. Yates set her up in his small spare room, bringing her blankets and water and wishing her good night with a chaste kiss. that somehow felt more intimate than anything she had experienced in Denver. She lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. The distant lowing of cattle, the creak of wood, the whisper of wind through the eaves. It felt like peace. It felt like home. Morning came with pale light and the smell of coffee. Willa found Yates already in the kitchen, cooking eggs and bacon. He smiled when he saw her, his hair mussed from sleep, and she felt her heart turn over. "Good morning," he said. "Sleep well, better than I have in years." They ate breakfast together as the sun rose over the mountains, and Willa allowed herself to imagine this as her daily reality. Waking up here, cooking with Yates, building a life in this place. It seemed almost too good to be real. When he took her back to town that afternoon, they found Martha waiting with news. Silas Thornton had left on the morning stage, recalled to Denver for business. His brother, the land office agent, had been apologetic, explaining that Silas was known for causing trouble and was not welcome to visit again. "See," Martha said triumphantly. "The bully has moved on. Life goes back to normal." But life did not go back to normal exactly. It moved forward into something new. Over the following weeks, Willa found her place in the community solidifying. Yes, there were people who whispered and judged, but there were more who seemed willing to accept her. The Chinese family who ran the restaurant became friends, grateful for her defense of their daughter. The pastor's wife hired her to make altar cloths, a gesture that felt like benediction. And through it all, there was Yates. Steady, patient Yates who showed up every Sunday without fail. Who brought her coffee at the dress shop on Wednesday mornings when he came to town for supplies. Who wrote her letters during the week, simple notes about ranch life that made her smile. In November, the first real snow fell, blanketing Benton in white. Yates arrived in his wagon, wrapped in a thick coat, and bundled Willa up for a ride. He took her to the ranch where everything sparkled in the cold sunlight, pristine and beautiful. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her to the house. Inside, she found that he had been working. The addition he mentioned was framed out, the bones of new rooms visible. "A bigger kitchen," he explained, walking her through. "And here this would be a proper bedroom, large enough for a family." "Yates." She turned to him, her eyes filling with tears. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a simple gold band. "Willa Zimmerman, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and help me turn this house into a home? Will you let me spend every day for the rest of my life showing you how much you are loved?" She should have been more scared. She should have hesitated, worried about whether she deserved this. But standing in his half-built house with snow falling outside and love shining in his eyes, she felt only certainty. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her until she was dizzy with joy. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing, he swept her up and spun her around. "We will have such a good life," he promised. "I will make sure of it." They set the wedding for December, giving Yates time to finish the addition and Willa time to sew her dress. Martha was thrilled, immediately diving into plans for a celebration. The whole town seemed to rally around the upcoming wedding, eager for something joyful as winter set in. Willa made her dress with painstaking care, using cream-colored silk that Martha ordered specially. Every stitch was a prayer of gratitude, of hope. She embroidered tiny flowers along the hem and sleeves, marking this garment as something precious. The night before the wedding, Martha sat with her in her small room above the shop. "Are you nervous?" the older woman asked. "Terrified," Willa admitted. "Not of marrying Yates, I am sure about that, but of deserving this happiness, of it being taken away." "Happiness is not something we have to earn, dear. It is something we accept when it is offered." Martha squeezed her hand. "Yates loves you. That is clear to anyone with eyes, and you love him. That is all that matters." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the sun brilliant on snow. Willa dressed with shaking hands, pinning her hair up with the pearl combs that had been her mother's. Martha helped her into the silk dress, fastening the long row of buttons. "You look beautiful," Martha said, her eyes misty. "Like an angel." They walked to the church together, Willa's heart hammering with every step. But when she entered and saw Yates waiting at the altar, tall and handsome in his best suit, all her fear melted away. His face lit up when he saw her, and she knew with absolute certainty that this was right. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, his voice warm with approval as he spoke about love and commitment, and the courage it takes to build a life together. When Yates took her hands and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life. To stand beside you through whatever comes, to never let you doubt your worth or your place in my heart. You are my home now, Willa, my future, my everything." Willa's vows came through tears. "I promise to love you with everything I am, to build a home with you and fill it with joy. To trust in your love even when I am afraid. You saved me, Yates, not from my past, but from the belief that I could not have a future. I will spend my life being worthy of that gift." When they kissed as husband and wife, the small church erupted in applause. Willa turned to face the congregation, saw the smiling faces, and knew that she had truly found her place. Not everyone was there, some still judged her too harshly. But enough, good people had come to celebrate their union that the church felt full and warm. They held a reception at the hotel, with food and dancing and toasts that grew more sentimental as the whiskey flowed. Yates danced with Willa until her feet ached, holding her close and whispering promises in her ear that made her blush and laugh. As evening fell, they rode out to the ranch in Yates' wagon, bundled under blankets against the cold. The house glowed with lamplight, welcoming them home. Yates carried her over the threshold, tradition satisfied, and set her down gently in the new kitchen. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he said, and the name sent a thrill through her. That night, Yates loved her with a tenderness that erased every painful memory. He treated her like she was precious, worthy, his equal in every way. Afterward, they lay tangled together in his bed, their bed now, and talked until the early hours of morning. "Are you happy?" he asked, stroking her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered honestly. "Sometimes I worry I will wake up and find this was all a dream." "It is not a dream. It is our life, and we get to live it together." He kissed her forehead. "I know you still carry scars, Willa. I know healing is not instant, but I will be here for all of it. Every step forward and every step back. You are not alone anymore." "Neither are you," she said, holding him tighter. "We heal each other." Their first winter together was hard in the way all Montana winters were hard, with brutal cold and endless snow. But inside their home, Willa found contentment she had never known. She cooked meals in her new kitchen, learning from Yates how to make his favorite dishes. She sewed curtains for all the windows and made quilts to keep them warm. She learned to help with the animals, feeding chickens and gathering eggs, even learning to milk the cow Yates bought. Yates taught her to ride properly, patient through her initial nervousness. By spring, she could ride out with him to check the herd, working side by side as partners. The ranch hands accepted her presence easily, tipping their hats respectfully and complimenting her cooking when she brought lunch out to the fields. In March, Willa woke feeling sick and realized with a mixture of joy and terror that she was pregnant. She told Yates that evening, watching his face carefully for any sign of hesitation. Instead, he let out a whoop of pure joy and lifted her carefully, spinning her around until she laughed. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." Are you happy?" She asked, needing to hear it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. You are giving me a family again, Willa, a future." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "This child will be so loved, so wanted. I promise you that." The pregnancy was not easy. Willa was sick frequently, and there were moments when her old fears resurfaced. What if she was not a good mother? What if her past somehow tainted her child? Yates was endlessly patient, holding her hair when she was sick, rubbing her swollen feet, reassuring her constantly that she would be a wonderful mother. Martha was thrilled, immediately starting to sew baby clothes. The women of Benton threw a party for Willa, bringing gifts and advice. Even some who had been cool to her initially seemed to soften, brought together by the universal joy of new life. On a hot September afternoon, almost exactly 2 years after Willa had arrived in Benton, she gave birth to a son. The labor was long and difficult, but when Yates placed the squalling infant in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. "He is perfect," Yates said, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at him, Willa. He is perfect." They named him Jacob after Yates' brother who had died in the war. Little Jacob had his father's gray-blue eyes and a full head of dark hair. Willa held him and cried, overwhelmed by love and fear and gratitude all at once. "I am so afraid of failing him," she whispered. "You will not. You love him. That is what matters." Yates sat beside them on the bed, putting his arm around both of them. "We are a family now, a real family." Jacob thrived, a happy baby who smiled easily and slept well. Willa found motherhood came more naturally than she expected. She sang to him while she worked, rocked him for hours, marveled at every tiny change. Yates was a devoted father, coming in from the fields to play with his son, making silly faces that sent Jacob into peals of laughter. As Jacob grew, the ranch prospered. Yates' herd increased, and he hired more hands to help with the work. They built another addition onto the house, creating a proper nursery and a room for guests. Martha came to visit often, doting on Jacob and declaring him the smartest, handsomest child in the territory. When Jacob was 2, Willa became pregnant again. This time she was less frightened, more confident in her abilities as a mother. The birth was easier, and they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah, after Yates' first wife. Willa had suggested the name, wanting to honor the woman who had come before her, and Yates had held her close, thanking her for understanding. Little Sarah was a calm baby with blonde hair like her mother and her father's steady temperament. Jacob was fascinated by his sister, always wanting to help care for her. Watching her children play together, Willa sometimes had to pinch herself to believe this was her life. There were hard moments still. Sometimes a particular sound or smell would trigger memories from Denver, sending Willa spiraling into fear. But Yates always knew, always helped her through it with patience and love. And as the years passed, those moments came less frequently. One evening when Jacob was 5 and Sarah was 3, Willa stood on the porch of their ranch house watching the sun set over the mountains. Yates came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far I have come. About the girl who stepped off that stagecoach 7 years ago, terrified and ashamed. I barely recognize her now." "She was brave," Yates said. "She took a chance on a new life, and look what that courage brought her." Inside, they could hear the children playing, Jacob's laughter and Sarah's delighted squeals. The sound of family, of home. Willa leaned into her husband's embrace, feeling utterly content. "I love you," she said. "I do not say it enough, but I do. You saved my life, Yates Xavier." "We saved each other," he corrected. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to truly live again." They stood there as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue, stars beginning to emerge. The ranch spread around them, solid and real. This life they had built together, moment by moment, choice by choice. "You ever regret it?" Willa asked. "Taking a chance on me, dealing with the gossip and judgment?" "Never, not for one single second." He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children, this life we have. I would do it all again, exactly the same way, just to end up right here with you." She kissed him, deep and sweet, still feeling that spark of attraction that had drawn them together from the beginning. After all these years, he still made her heart race. He still looked at her like she was everything. The years continued to pass peacefully. Jacob grew into a thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with the ranch. Sarah became a chatterbox who followed her mother everywhere, learning to sew and cook. 2 more children followed, a son they named Thomas, and then another daughter, Emma. The house rang with noise and laughter, with the chaos of a large family. Willa continued to sew, though now it was mostly for her family rather than for pay. She made clothes for her children, quilts for their beds, curtains for every window. Each stitch was an act of love, a tangible expression of the gratitude she felt for this life. Martha grew older but remained spry and active, closing the dress shop eventually but continuing to sew for pleasure. She was Grandma Martha to Willa's children, a beloved figure who spoiled them and told them stories. She never married, saying she had all the family she needed in Willa and her brood. The town of Benton grew slowly, becoming more established as Montana Territory moved toward statehood. The rough edges smoothed gradually. More families arrived. A proper school was built, and Willa served on the board, determined to ensure all children had access to education. No one mentioned her past anymore, and the newer residents had no idea of the scandal that had once surrounded her marriage to Yates. She was simply Mrs. Xavier, the rancher's wife, mother of 4, skilled seamstress and friend to many. She had become exactly what she pretended to be all those years ago, and the pretending had long since stopped. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates took Willa back to the spot where they had their first real conversation, the creek that gave the ranch its name. The children were staying with Martha in town, giving them a rare day alone together. They sat by the water, older now but still in love, still choosing each other every day. Yates had gone gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished look. Willa had laugh lines around her eyes, marks of a life lived joyfully. "I have been thinking," Yates said, skipping stones across the water. "About that day we sat here and you told me about Denver. Do you remember what I said? You said a lot of things that day, all of them kind. I said when I looked at you, I only saw our future ahead, not your past, just our future." He turned to her, taking her hand. "I want you to know that is still true, maybe more true now than ever. When I look at you, I see the woman who built this life with me, who gave me children and love and purpose. I see my partner, my best friend, my wife. That is all I see." Willa's eyes filled with tears, happy tears this time, not the frightened tears of her youth. "I see the same when I look at you, the man who believed in me when I could not believe in myself, who taught me that I deserved love and happiness. You gave me everything, Yates." "We gave each other everything," he corrected, the same way he had years ago on the porch. "That is how love works. It multiplies, it grows. We started with nothing but hope, and look what we built." They kissed there by the creek, with no one to see but the mountains and sky. Then they lay back on the grass, holding hands and talking about their children, their plans, their dreams for the years ahead. "You think we are done having babies?" Yates asked with a grin. "4 seems like a good number, but I would not mind another if you wanted." Willa laughed. 4 is plenty, I think. I am 33 years old, Yates. Let us enjoy the children we have. Fair enough. Though I will miss having babies in the house. Give it time. Someday we will have grandchildren to spoil. They stayed by the creek until sunset, reluctant to return to the world. But eventually, they rode back to the ranch, to the house that had become so much more than just walls and roof. It was the physical manifestation of their love, their commitment to each other. That night, after making love with the comfortable passion of long marriage, Willa lay in Yates' arms and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Philadelphia to Denver to Benton, from fear to hope to love, from believing she was ruined to understanding she was redeemed. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Yates asked sleepily, his hand tracing patterns on her back. "For seeing me. Really seeing me. For loving me when I could not love myself. For giving me this life. You never have to thank me for loving you, Willa. It is the easiest thing I have ever done." As she drifted off to sleep, safe and warm and loved, Willa sent up a prayer of gratitude. For this man beside her, for the children sleeping down the hall, for the second chance she never thought she deserved but grabbed anyway. For the courage to believe that the past did not have to define the future. She had expected judgment when the truth about her came out. She had expected rejection and shame. Instead, Yates had looked at her and seen only possibility, only their future ahead. And in choosing to believe him, in choosing to trust his love, she had found everything she never knew she needed. The years continued their steady march. Jacob grew into a young man who took over more of the ranch work, already showing signs of becoming the man his father was: steady, principled, kind. Sarah became a beauty who also inherited her mother's skill with needle and thread. Thomas was wild and adventurous, always exploring the mountains and coming home with scraped knees and stories. Emma, the baby, was sweet and gentle, content to help her mother in the house and garden. Montana achieved statehood in 1889, and the celebration in Benton lasted 3 days. Willa stood with her family watching the fireworks, holding Emma on her hip while Yates kept his arm around her waist, and felt profoundly grateful to be part of this place, this time, this life. As Willa grew older, she found herself thinking less about the painful past and more about the beautiful present. The Denver days faded like a bad dream, losing their power to hurt her. She had lived so many more days as Yates' wife than she ever had as Madame Rose's girl. The good had outweighed the bad so thoroughly that the scales were not even close to balanced anymore. When Martha died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, Willa mourned her like the mother she had become. At the funeral, she spoke about the older woman's kindness, about the chance she gave a desperate girl with nowhere to go. She did not mention Denver specifically, but everyone who had been in town long enough understood what she was saying. Martha had saved her, and in doing so, had set in motion everything good in her life. Jacob married at 22, bringing home a sweet girl from Helena who fit into the family seamlessly. Their first child, a son, was born when Willa was 44, making her a grandmother. Holding that baby, seeing her son as a father, the circle of life continuing, Willa felt overwhelmed with joy. "Grandma Willa," Sarah teased, laughing at her mother's tears. "You are going to spoil him rotten." "That is what grandmothers are for," Willa said, not caring that she was crying. "That is exactly what grandmothers are for." Yates was equally smitten with his grandson, carving him toys and building him a cradle. They named the baby Yates Jacob Xavier, and the proud grandfather could not stop grinning. Sarah married next, then Thomas, and eventually even Emma. The house that had been built for Yates and Willa alone now served as the heart of an extended family. Sunday dinners saw 20 people crowded around the expanded table, 3 generations eating and laughing and loving together. On Willa's 50th birthday, Yates threw her a party that filled their home and spilled into the yard. It seemed like half of Benton showed up, bringing food and gifts and warm wishes. Willa stood on the porch looking at all these people, this community she was part of, and felt her heart might burst. Yates found her there, pulling her away from the crowd for a moment alone. "Happy birthday, my love. Thank you for this, for all of it. Not just the party, but everything. This whole life. You have thanked me enough over the years." He kissed her forehead. "I think by now we can agree that we both got exactly what we needed. I got more than I needed. I got more than I ever dreamed possible." He held her close, and they swayed slightly to the music drifting from inside. Willa closed her eyes and breathed him in, this man who had changed everything, who had looked past her mistakes and shame to see the woman she could become, who had loved her fiercely and faithfully for more than 20 years. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. "If you had judged me that day, I told you the truth. If you had walked away, I try not to think about it. That would have been the biggest mistake of my life." He pulled back to look at her. "You were always meant to be here, Willa, with me, building this family, living this life. I believe that. I think some things are just meant to be, even when they start out so broken, especially then. The best things in life are the ones we have to fight for, the ones we have to rebuild from pieces. That makes them stronger." They returned to the party, to their children and grandchildren and friends. They danced and ate cake and celebrated another year of life, another year of love. And when everyone finally left and the house was quiet again, they sat on the porch watching the stars. 22 years, Willa said. 22 years since I stepped off that stagecoach. Best 22 years of my life, Yates responded immediately. Mine too, every single day of them. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone so well that words are not always necessary. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful in the way only a place truly loved can be. Willa thought about that terrified girl who had arrived in Benton, expecting nothing but more judgment and shame. She thought about how Yates had offered her something entirely different: acceptance, love, a future. She thought about the family they had built, the life they had created through choice and commitment and endless faith in each other. "I love you," she said, simple words that carried the weight of decades. "I love you too. Always have, always will." As they went inside to bed, Willa took one last look at the stars over Montana, at the mountains that had witnessed her transformation from broken to whole. She thought about all the moments, big and small, that had brought her to this place. The mistakes and the redemptions. The fear and the courage. The loneliness and the love. She had expected judgment for her past, but Yates had said those words that changed everything. "I only see our future ahead." And in living into that future, day by day, year by year, they had created something beautiful and lasting. A legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone, carried on through their children and grandchildren. That night, as she fell asleep beside the man who had saved her by believing in her, Willa felt nothing but peace. The past was finally, truly past. The future was full of promise. And the present, this beautiful present full of love and family and purpose, was more than she had ever dared to dream. She had found her home, not just in Montana but in Yates' arms. She had found her worth, not in what others thought of her but in who she chose to become. She had found redemption, not through perfection but through the messy, beautiful work of building a life worth living. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.